Hi, Matt. How are you?
Doing well, Devinder. Pleasure to be here.
Well, before we start, I really want to say thank you from bottom of my heart. And this thank you is not just for you appearing on this podcast, but this is for something else. Now, if you recall, you invited me on your podcast, The Matt Report. And I know you won't even know about it because I'm going to tell you for the first time that that was my first ever podcast interview. But that was not my first ever invite to be on the podcast. I was invited for a few podcasts before that, but I never had that strength, courage, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call, to say yes. But when you invited and I shared that with a few of my friends, I said, hey, there's some guy called Matt. He invited me for this podcast. And they said, are you an idiot? You're going to say no because you've been saying no to everyone. And I say, okay, if you insist, because seriously, I didn't know about you that much at that time, to be honest. And I said, okay, let me say yes. This time around, what at max can happen? I'll lose my voice. That's about it. So, I think,
it's easy not to lose anything when you go on a show that doesn't have a lot of listeners, right? So a lot of people, who could you offend, right? There's not that many listeners of the Matt Report.
So seriously, thank you from bottom of my heart, because it was you who actually opened the door for me to get into this audio thing and then further video and all that thing. So seriously, thank you very much. I know you didn't even realize that you did something, but now you know.
There we go. I'm glad that you found the courage. It is something of courage to create content. Maybe we'll talk about that stuff today. But yeah, happy to have you on. And it was one of the best shows ever. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, that was surprise number 2 for me. Okay, so we'll start this episode. But before we begin and talk about your online journey, entrepreneur journey, do you want to give small introduction, like what you've been doing in this online world for a couple of years or maybe more?
Yeah. So I've been doing it for a while now, probably about, if I were to really count the years, probably about 15 to 20 years, somewhere in there of doing things on the web or doing things computer related. Mm-hmm. Everything that I do can be found at craftedbymatt.com, sort of just a running list of a bunch of wins, failures, middle of the road type of victories, but everything at Crafted by Matt is there. But my day job is at pagely.com, where I manage WordPress hosting for the fine folks, the fine team over at pagely.com, and a bunch of other things that we could probably talk about today. Still do the Matt Report podcast, do a bunch with YouTube. So happy to talk about anything.
Okay, let's get directly into the methodology of being a successful entrepreneur. Now, there are different kind of people and they all have their own ways of doing work. Now, what is your way? Like, do you like to do lots of things at a given time, or do you focus on one specific thing at one specific time?
Yeah, it's a little bit of happy chaos, right? This is a term I've thrown around with a few guests before in the past. Actually, might have been the name of a podcast episode of someone else's that I've interviewed. But anyway, it's a bit of a happy chaos thing. Just sort of trying things out. I'm not one to really sit down and blueprint every step of the way and look at the financials and look at the risk. A lot of it is just being ignorant, and ignorant in actually a good way of not knowing certain things that would often frighten people from starting something. And just really testing the waters. The one thing that I try to stay consistent with is to have an audience around, is to build a community of people. No matter how big or small it might be, it's useful to have a good network of folks that you can lean on, and the podcast has really done that. So I have that audience. I have a good connection of people, and when I come up with an idea, it's hey, I'll bounce it off of them and see how they react to it before I go to market. I'll do things like that. I will often forget about crazy ideas that I get. I won't even write it down. There's a lot of ideas that I have that I write down and sort of save and think about. The real crazy ones I'll forget, and if they do resurface, and they keep coming back to me, then I'll really start to pursue those types of things and sort of etch away at ways to approach it. In fact, one of them will hopefully be launching around mid-October. This one idea that I have, and we'll see where it goes. But I am not afraid to launch things, and if they don't go anywhere, they don't go anywhere. It's not like I'm taking anybody's money. I'm just putting things out there. I'm testing the waters. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I often find that the lessons in that are the best takeaways.
I love the word crazy chaos. I'm exactly like that. I have my fingers in so many things, but you know what? I enjoy doing it because it keeps the boredom away and it keeps you interested in the online world, because it can be a lonely place if you are only in the online world and not, networking in the offline world.
Absolutely.
So, where do you get the inspiration for your next big ideas, or even small ideas that can become big?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's a lot of just talking to a lot of people, and I think that folks that actually create awesome products, when you create an awesome product and it really takes off, your time is overwhelmed by supporting and building that awesome product. So if you're a guy like myself, or a gal who's in the audience listening to this, who have, put out small wins, small victories, you are often found with, hey, there must be something else, right? I've learned something in this path. I'm taking away some knowledge from that, and I'm going to apply it to the next thing. That if I, to use maybe WordPress plugins and products that are out there, had I built something like Saya did with Opt-in Monster or something like that, yeah, that is a crazy undertaking. Maybe it started off small, but as it grew, like, your time is super consumed with stuff like that. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that there is to use a term that's maybe used more in the US, there's blue collar and white collar. I really feel like in the digital space, the whole blue collar thing, where you normally relate to folks in the US who are doing, manual labor, like a plumber, electrician, or whatever, people who are using their hands to build something, really feel like that's actually happening in the digital space as well. You can have small ebooks, you can have themes that you sell, you can do these little things that aren't making you hundreds of $1,000s a month, but they might equate to $100,000 a year, which is pretty good in most cases. So to say where I draw my inspiration is, well, I haven't found something that is just, I'm 110% dedicated to. I will continue to launch things because, one, it's manageable, and two, it's just fun. And I talk to a lot of people. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube. There's all of that stuff that culminates in this.
Okay.
But,
so you said you don't do any profound planning or, ideation when launching things, but when you launch something significant like your Conductor plugin, did you do any validation or preliminary analysis during that period?
Yeah, absolutely. So that one was when I was in the agency day to day, we were building Conductor for customers without even knowing it was Conductor yet. It was based, it's a query builder. You make a query, you display it, and you can display it in different ways. Mm-hmm. We were just doing that on repeat. Every customer that we had, we were reusing the same code. And then customers said, hey, at the time, is for a lot of publishers. They were saying, hey, we want 2 columns, we want 3 columns, we want 6 columns. Can we just change this so you don't have to do this every time? So we started building in the basic options to do that. And at the time, that's when we were really interested in getting into WordPress products. So we took that, we sort of wrapped it up and turned it into a product, stuff that we could support and resell. But at that time, I did create a pitch deck. Here's how I perceive this product. Here's who I think it'll serve in the market. And then what I did do was create a roundtable of trusted advisors, right? About a dozen or so people that I talked to and showed them and presented the idea to, sort of just made sure it was what I was thinking. And then I went up to about 35 different one-on-one conversations before actually turning it into a product with other people, other peers in the space, before launching that. So I did a lot of sort of just brainstorming with people, but never like a, price check aisle 9. Would you pay for this? Nothing like that.
Yeah, that's very important. But you mentioned very important point that people are doing small things, selling small things. And guess what? I find my happiness being small, keeping my agency small, keeping my work profile small, because not just it gives you happiness, but it's also profitable if you compare it with a bigger setup, because you will have bigger expenses as well. So you found success in a lot of ways. So what does success mean for you? Is it recognition, money, or something else?
It's a lot of it. It's a lot of everything, really.
Yeah.
But truly, it's again, as I get older, I now have two sons. I realize that it sounds crazy, but it's just like you just want to be happy doing what you're doing.
Exactly.
And that is a different label for everyone. But yeah, I mean, I want to be happy what I'm doing. I am a capitalist at heart, so I want to make more money. That's certainly not something that is, something I've lost sight of. But generally, more and more so with the content and the products that I put out, I really want to be able to help people too. If people can come to me and I can help them in different ways, then that's a win-win for me as well. So really it's, hey, I'm happy doing what I'm doing now. I enjoy the work that I'm doing. Yes, it's still stressful. There's a whole thing of like what you see on social media is so totally different than what the person is going through. There's the envy of other people. Yeah, I mean, of course I get that. I see other people doing awesome things with awesome products. Like, wow, I could have done that too. But you know what? I take a step back and realize I sit behind a computer all day, and this is how I make money. Yeah. Right? I'm home all the time. Like I have friends that commute, 4 hours a day, every single day, 30 hours a week in a car. I would never do that. I don't care how much money you paid me. So now as I get older, it's like, I'm happy. I can do this stuff wherever I am. If, WordPress were to go away, I feel like I have enough learnings where I could just pivot to another industry or another product and be like, hey, all that learning stuff, I'll bring it over here and I can be successful over here. So,
and catching glimpse of your kids anytime during the day, isn't that a success itself?
It is. It is. It's again, I won't paint a different picture. Sometimes it is difficult working from home when you have kids, yelling in the background, or there's a bunch of things going on. But at the same time, I see my friends that never see their kids, right? So they don't see their kids until the weekend. They leave the house before their kids wake up. They get home when their kids are already in bed, and that's 5 days out of the week. And to me, that's insane. This is a blessing to be able to work from home and see them all the time.
Okay, let's dive into our favorite ecosystem, which is WordPress. Now,
Drupal, right?
No. You never know. It might be Drupal in few years to come. Okay, so WordPress, ever since we all came to know WordPress, it's been changing at a very rapid pace. Like, we get to know new changes, and like 1 year in WordPress is equal to like 5 years in offline world. So how do you adapt to these changes and stay top of your game for, say, consistent performance of your WordPress products and even services that you offer based on WordPress?
Yeah. So I know this isn't going to be a good answer for a lot of people, but I am lucky to have a podcast that allows me to talk to a whole bunch of people, right? So even now starting my job at Pagely, it's been just over a year since I started there. So I have actually found myself pleasantly surprised to remember, or I should take a step back. When I logged into my WordPress site the other day to do some stuff, I was like, wow, it's been a while since I've actually installed a plugin or modified a theme, because I haven't had to do that as often as I did when I was running the agency. But being able to have these conversations with people all the time, talk to an amazing smart team at Pagely, and even on the product side with Conductor in the studio, which is still running. My dad runs it. There's a team there. The team still supports Conductor. I still contribute to Conductor from a broad, strategic point of view. Keeping up with all of these folks that I talk to and the different teams that are running, it's just a great way to stay connected for me anyway.
So that's the good part about WordPress. Now let's talk about not so good part about the WordPress. Like, what are your challenges keeping in touch with, building your products and services on WordPress platform? Like that feeling, wish that feature had been there in WordPress.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a specific feature thing. I mean, I'll talk from two or maybe even three different angles here. From from the Pagely perspective, the fact that the hosting business is super competitive. When you are a niche hosting company like Pagely, and your prices are a little bit higher, but because your service level is so much greater, people are looking at a dozen other competitors out there that are far cheaper, and they're trying to understand what is happening in this space. That is definitely a particular challenge, but it's an easy win once people get to experience that type of service. From the product side, Conductor is, and maybe some people will scoff at this or laugh at this, but Conductor is what Gutenberg is today. Like the concept of Conductor and blocks, when we launched that, it was blocks, and people were like, what are you talking about, blocks? So we were trying to do sort of what Gutenberg is doing today, without having all the bells and whistles of a page builder and just giving people blocks of content. Now we were just two people at the time.
When I first saw the Conductor plugin, like few years back, I guess, it was just like a stripped down version of a current page builder. Like you could build a block and you can put in everything that you want to in, having custom HTML or CSS. So
right.
I think Gutenberg is almost similar. It's just they are implementing in a different way with a lot of noise. Yeah.
And so here was the challenge in that is the gamble, and this is what happens in open source, because you don't control the entire WordPress experience. Is we took a step back and said, okay, most of our peers, and us included, we were WordPress developers, so we were trying to do things the WordPress way. So we said, well, let's just leverage what WordPress is giving us. And at the time, WordPress only gave us widgets. So a lot of people hated widgets, but we wanted to work within the boundaries of WordPress. We didn't want to create something new. We didn't want to create a new piece of technology. So we leveraged widgets, and shortly after, the customizer came out. And we leveraged the customizer because that's what WordPress was doing. So we were trying to be doing it the WordPress way while everybody else was building all of this other stuff around it. People hated the customizer, right? Yeah. We didn't particularly enjoy it, but what I was betting on back then was widgets and customizer. I was looking at what WordPress was doing, and theoretically, what they've built with Gutenberg is widgets and customizer, except they're calling it blocks and it's inside the editor, right? So, but we were trying to take this bet and say, let's put everything there, and then guess what? What happened? The market didn't really adopt the customizer as much as we thought it would. People never really liked widgets, and now, oh, by the way, page builders came out, and now we have Gutenberg. So that was a particular challenge, especially in the open source world. You can't, things are going to move, and you have to be able to adjust.
And now this is a hypothetical question. If WordPress did not exist, what would be your preferred platform other than WordPress?
Tough question. I came from the Drupal world, so I probably would have stayed on Drupal. If WordPress didn't exist, that's probably where we have been, or maybe some other CMS. Years ago, we, like everyone else, we built our own CMS when we first started out, and we built like a simple 5-page website builder, and it was pretty awesome. And in fact, it could probably still be pretty awesome today if we stuck with it as an alternative to heavy CMSs. But probably Drupal is where we would planted our feet back then.
Okay, now let's come a little outside WordPress and go into your podcasting world, which obviously is based on WordPress. So how did the idea of starting a podcast come?
Yeah, so I've told this story a few times, and when I first started my agency, we had some in my area where I live. It's close to Providence, Rhode Island, and at the time we had a lot of big players in this area. So we had Jake Goldman from 10up, we had Jay Tripp from Buddy Press, and now Sandhills Development. Jesse Friedman now works at Jetpack. A whole bunch of people that are sort of big name WordPressers. We're all here. And I started my agency, and I would at that time that I went to the first WordPress meetup in Providence, and Jake had just started his agency, 10up at the time, or he had just begun to start that. And quickly I saw how fast Jake was growing his company. And I was looking at him going, okay, wow, you're growing really fast. How are you doing that? Not knowing, who Jake really was, not knowing he was probably a core contributor back then and just really deeply rooted in the community. But he was a developer. He was an engineer. I wasn't. I was hiring people to work with us. So I said, well, I see how powerful it is to leverage the WordPress community. Again, Jake being a developer and giving back code. I was at a WordCamp New York. I forget what year it was. And I remember Andrew Nason walking down the aisle to do his keynote presentation or just a talk, whatever it was. And people were like, oh my God, it's Andrew Nason, right? And
celebrity.
Celebrity status. And what clicked in me was like, wow, there is like a celebrity status thing that's happening in this community. Maybe I'll just start a blog to highlight people and interview people through the blog. But then I was really into podcasts back then. I said, you know what? I'll just make a podcast. Let's just try this podcast thing and see if that's a way I can grow my awareness in the WordPress space. And I only knew my first guest, which was Jesse Friedman. And then every guest from that point on was just me on Twitter trying to find people and say, hey, I got this podcast thing. Want to join? And I think it was Jesse Friedman, Brian Castle, Curtis McHale. And then it was like just those three people. I was able to start a mini network and they were referring people and it grew from there.
I can relate to it because I'm doing the same these days, but I'm doing on Facebook rather than Twitter because things have changed. Now, Twitter isn't that interesting, to be honest. And okay, so how has your podcast contributed to your entrepreneurial success, like in terms of visibility, authority? Obviously, that celebrity status. Obviously, you are a celebrity for me. That's given.
I appreciate that. It is. I mean, it's probably the best thing that I've ever done for my business. I talk about podcasting a lot. People ask about the return on investment, the ROI. In the agency world, and when I was running my agency day to day, it was a contributor to probably multiple six figures worth of business that I've been able to do because of meeting people and getting connected and meeting other agencies in the space. I hate a thought leader or authority, figure. And I honestly don't, I don't consider myself a celebrity, just somebody that's just putting stuff out, right? Just talking and what's on my mind. But it certainly has helped the business tremendously. And, when I made the decision to take the job at Pagely, had I never done the podcast, that opportunity would have never existed. And other opportunities that I've had over time. So, doing a podcast is a great thing. It's funny. It's funny that people still say this is an amazing podcast. I haven't published an episode since March of this year. Season 8 is coming out, but it has this ripple effect that I think a lot of people don't realize, that it's not like you have to create a podcast every single week, but you sort of define that path and people recognize you for that, regardless of the publishing cadence. So it's a powerful tool.
So podcasting, you have your own agency, you're selling products on WordPress based, and your next big jump was working for Pagely, I guess. So how did that happen? Obviously, podcast helped in a little bit of, getting recognition in getting that job, but was there something surprising there?
Yeah, I've talked about, so in this upcoming season 8 of the Matt Reports, the overarching story is about the change of WordPress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So change, as in the software is changing, the market's changing, the people are changing, and about 2 years ago, and I share this opinion with a lot of other agencies and freelancers. About 2 years ago, things got pretty tight in the services space, right? The leads weren't coming in as much. There's a lot of competition. Expectations from customers were, budget-wise, were very low. There is definitely an uprise that's happening right now, but things got pretty tight back then. And I was just having my first son. My second son was coming, and it was a point where the day-to-day operations of a business were just way too stressful to manage that, and also at the same time having 2 kids. So it just was a realization of like, look, I have to remove myself from this role and find another thing to do. And Pagely had Josh Strebel had actually, had asked me before if I wanted a sales job at Pagely. Like, look, man, don't you know I run an agency and a podcast? Like, don't you know I do this stuff? And he's like, oh, I didn't even know you did that. I was like, oh, that's great. Thanks, Josh. But he had asked me in the past, and then it came up again at the recent Pressnomics, and I really started to think about it. And I talked to a few other folks that had some opportunities, but Pagely was the best fit at the time, and still is. It's an amazing company.
So, working on a flexible schedule, like as a solopreneur, agency, managing products, to fitting in a role of a job, if it's not a traditional job, was it easy fitting at Pagely?
Pagely specifically, yes. As I mentioned, I talked to a few other opportunities before joining Pagely, and some of them, didn't want me to do a podcast. They certainly didn't want me to have Conductor out there. Everything was, committed to just, wiping everything out that I've done, like the Matt Report and all of the sort of WordPress thought leadership stuff, and just, aligning with their goals, which is fine. Josh was much more amicable with that, and where he said, no, you can keep doing the Matt Report. You can have Conductor. I mean, as long as you're doing your job, which I do. If you're listening, Josh, I do my job. Then everything is okay. And like I said, Conductor, it's a small product. There's a headphone company out there called Grado Labs, GRADO-LABS, Grado Labs. They're a headphone company in Brooklyn, New York, and they're like a family-owned headphone company. They're handmade headphones. It's not like Beats or Sony, or Samsung headphones. These aren't massively known people. A small product that a handful of customers enjoy, more than a handful of customers enjoy. And that's the same thing with Conductor. It's not something that takes up a massive amount of time, but it sells. There's customers every month. There's more customers every month. There's new features that roll out, but it's not a massive flash brand that people are going to, take all kinds of time with. So the short of that is I got really lucky with getting it in with Pagely. They allow me to be flexible with my podcasting stuff, the product stuff. So it's a happy fit. I think a lot of people who give up on freelancing or in growing an agency, the agency still runs. There's still a team there. It's still profitable. It still brings in customers every month. It is the true definition of an entrepreneur is you build something that you can walk away from and it keeps running. And that's what I was able to do. So when we talk about success and measuring success, a lot of people look at getting a job as something that isn't a success, but I view it differently.
And coming to your agency, do you have permanent employees there managing things, or do you have contractors or remote people?
Yes. Yeah, it's employees that work there. My father runs the agency, so we were partners, and he still runs it, day to day, servicing small businesses, right? Doing small business websites and things like that.
And Pagely being WordPress centric, I guess that was another attractive point for you to join that company, right?
Yeah. I mean, knowing the space very well, and one of my very first jobs was working at an internet provider, and I sort of managed a lot of the web hosting stuff. So I had a lot of experience that way, and of course WordPress experience, so sales experience. So it was an easy fit.
Now, to a newish person in the WordPress world, would you advise choosing a niche or a specific field within WordPress, or just try whatever they can and find their sweet spot in the process?
Yeah, I think it depends on where they're at, right? I think a lot of people, you have to cast a wide net in the beginning and pull it back in and see which fish you want to keep. see which products and services that you really want to go after. Again, I think a lot of people can get wrapped up in just trying to find a blueprint to do one thing. And sometimes, like we talked about earlier, the failing and the stumbling and, banging your toe as you're trying to find the right thing to do is actually a good thing. It's not the most fun. It's not the fastest route. But sometimes you need to see what's out there to see what you really enjoy doing. I think if somebody just picked up a book on how to, niche down on web design, maybe they're not even a good web designer and they shouldn't be doing, design, but they're trying to follow this blueprint to success that somebody is pitching them. But certainly finding the right fit and really knowing your customers. That's really the number one thing that people have to do is align with the customers that you really want to work with. In the beginning, we were like, hey, so here's a great example. In the agency stuff, we were like, lawyers have money. Let's sell websites to lawyers. And it was the worst thing ever. We didn't speak the language. The sales process was super lengthy. Then there was contracts because they're lawyers and we didn't have big contracts, right? So while they had the money, it was just, and we just kept trying to go after it and go after it. We're like, well, we'll learn. But what happened is once we got them as customers, we didn't like working with them. We just did not like the process. Maybe if we had added some extra zeros to the end of the invoice, it would have been okay, but it just wasn't fun to work with them. So I think, if you can align with the right types of customers that you can talk with and enjoy working with, and then find that niche that you can serve for them, be it a website, SEO, content marketing, email newsletter, creating videos and podcasts for them, whatever it is, it's more important to find the customers that you can really jive with in a healthy way is probably my best piece of advice.
And I think another important thing in the online world is like side projects. Like a lot of us make side projects and some of them become main projects from side projects. Like I launched almost a project almost third or fourth month of a year, but most of them have flopped, which is fine, but I don't think them as a failure. I mostly consider it as a learning point. At least I did try something, or we all have this itch, I saw this, I've got this idea and I should try it. What's your view on it? Should we invest time on this?
Yeah, I mean, I did a blog post on my site called "A Side Hustle to My Side Hustle," and it's a little product that I had launched called User Feedback Videos. And don't visit that website right now because I think the SSL cert expired because I haven't touched it in a little while. But at the time that I was doing that, I get asked a lot was, hey, can you take a look at this? Can you give me some feedback on this product? Look at my website, I'm launching it. So I had started I can do that, but it's whatever. It was $50 or $60 for me to just do a screencast and show you all the different things that I think, from my own opinion, could be better. I've probably made a couple $1,000 just, doing that. And it sits there, and every once in a while, somebody will, one of the customers I had before will say, hey, can you do it again? I launched a new version. And it's pretty cool. And maybe sometime I'll, reinstall a new SSL cert and be able to point people to it. But yeah, I think that if you can manage it and it's something that doesn't take up a lot of time, it's fun to try these things out. The worst thing that you can do is not quickly see if you can make a sale. So that's the hard one, right? Is when you launch something, if you can't really make that connection super fast, that's the challenge. So knowing when to stop pursuing that, whatever that metric is. So if it's a sale, if it's an email newsletter sign up, if it's a certain amount of downloads to a video or a podcast, finding the sweet spot to say, okay, this is working. Being able to adjust fast is important there.
And now I'm going to ask one very favorite question that is troubling a lot of WordPress people, which is, I'm sure you've heard about it, something called Gutenberg.
Yep.
Now, what storm will it bring in WordPress ecosystem? It's already brought some storm.
Yeah, it definitely has. It's certainly one of those things where you're changing the way the editor process is, and just from a user perspective, people just don't like the change of things like that. Developers are very difficult to work with, most of them, right? They're very precise in their ways for good reason. That's what makes them, probably a good developer. They have their ways of doing things. People have a lot of opinion on how things should be coded and crafted and all, and I totally get that. So there's that challenge. There's the challenge of change. Again, like I said, I logged in the other day and we're testing Conductor with Gutenberg compatibility, and I was like, hey, it's actually pretty nice. I don't really mind the editing experience. Yeah, there's some nuances, but this is software. It's like what blows my mind is when people who are software developers freak out when they see something and they go, that's the dumbest way I've ever seen it done. Dude, you're building software. Like, you know, it's going to change. It's going to change. Let the evolution of software happen. I don't understand why people freak out. My issues with it are, which I've spoken about publicly before, is if you take a step up above Gutenberg, there's Jetpack. And my biggest thing is when we started products in the WordPress space, there was so much angst against selling commercial plugins, specifically from the top, starting with Matt Mullenweg, and then reviewers on the WordPress the WordPress theme review team. There was always this thing like, oh, you're selling, you shouldn't do this stuff. But then Jetpack is the biggest Trojan horse of selling commercial stuff, upsells.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is fine. Again, what I'm looking for is just, Jetpack should just announce itself as a startup and then talk about the revenue that they create like every other startup. Just treat yourself like a startup and be honest with it. Yeah. Nothing wrong with it. But I also think that the push of Gutenberg, you will see when Gutenberg is active with Jetpack active, you will see a much more definitive upsell stream. And you either love it or you don't, I don't know. But the idea to me is like, hey, this was for years pushed on us that selling is bad and gross. But now here we are going to do that and monetize it. So there's that. And then there's the lack of transparency of who's making the decision for all of these features and the releases of WordPress, right? There are much smarter people than I that talk about this stuff, like Morton. But where's the roadmap? If this is open source and we're all supposed to talk about this stuff, where's the roadmap that says, here's the next feature? Here's what we're going to roll into next, There's those types of, political issues that we run into in the WordPress space.
I don't know if you've seen that site, Guten Cloud, that list, custom Guten blocks. Now, it's just like people have started building their own custom Gutenberg blocks. Now, isn't that a parallel economy to like building your custom plugins? Like, where are we heading? Like, we already have an established economy of plugins which are free, paid. Now, we are just replicating the same economy on a same platform.
You're absolutely correct. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad you share some of the opinions that I share. You don't have to agree with everything I say. I know it's a little dangerous territory.
But that's logical, to be honest. It's just like you're creating a parallel economy on a same platform.
What we're leading to is you can buy, and this is what I mean with Jetpack, and this is the economic scare that I have is. You'll have Jetpack enabled. You'll have a WooCommerce site, and when you go to Gutenberg, your WooCommerce page, it'll say, "Buy this sale button, this new sale button for $2." Yeah. Right, and you'll be buying little micro blocks for $1, $5. Stupid little numbers that Jetpack can afford to sell in volume because they're the premium plugin that's recommended on WordPress.org. And that's where we're going to head. So people are going to be building these little micro blocks. They're not going to be able to, we talk about selling plugins at more dollars, but this is only going to introduce the $1 block. What good is that going to do anybody, right? In the long run, except for automatic.
And we can't blame developers for that because they will build on something that's already been provided. So they had the plugin economy, so everyone jumped into it and they solved problems with a lot of plugins. Now you can build so many things on WordPress via plugins, but now you are just providing a different plate with a different name, but economy shrunk, and probably maybe WordPress getting kickback on every sale.
Yes. I'll say something that's probably unpopular with a lot of folks is, when Gutenberg was released, you're always chasing new opportunity. It's smart to chase new opportunity and try to see, where you can win. If you get your foothold in Gutenberg right now and you do something awesome, you're probably going to win. That's awesome. But I'll go back to Grado Labs, the headphone company. They're just making wireless headphones now. Right? They had never joined, the Beats and the big brands. They don't sign any big athletes. They don't chase that stuff. And we're looking at Conductor the same way. Everyone's saying, hey, you're going to be Gutenberg compatible? yeah, you're going to be able to pick your conductor query in a block. That's it. That's all we're going to do right now, because we have customers that don't want to be in Gutenberg building all this stuff, and we're going to give you a traditional admin panel. You're going to go to another conductor window. You're going to create your query in an admin window. It's going to give you a shortcode and an ID, and you can use that in Gutenberg. We're not going to go crazy like everyone's rushing to stuff everything into Gutenberg. Our customers, they don't want it. They want the traditional way of doing things. So we're going to give it to them. And, again, it might not be flying off the shelves like a lot of other solutions, but will hopefully last the test of time.
Today only I saw a case study where they showed that we built our custom website using custom Gutenberg blocks. Now, when I shared that, a lot of among page builder users, they were saying, why would you waste time in building a custom Gutenberg block when you can do the same thing via a very simple, even a free version of a page builder? So it was like page builders against Gutenberg, because a lot of people say it's a page builder. Actually, it is not yet, but definitely it may become, it may even surpass Beaver Themer in maybe a few years down the line.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we're all, again, this is not anything different, right? We saw this with Google back in the day, where you used to know your terms, right? That people searched to get to your website.
Yeah.
Remember that, right? That was like, you knew how people found your site. You knew
that
how
was
to
gold,
optimize.
and
right.
Google dropped us from that.
And Google dropped you from that. Then the same thing happened with Facebook, right? Where it was like, make a page, have everybody like it. They can all see your updates. And that is just, if they run over.
Yeah.
WordPress is the same thing. This is why you never saw a big push. Like, why wasn't there a real WordPress plugin marketplace to go to? Like, the amount of money that is made through WordPress.org is immense. But guess what? There are greater plans at play here, and and I can't fault them for it. It's their that's the marketplace. You have the branding, and it is what it is. So we all have to be wary of that. I don't know what page builders are going to do other than, build, have their own SaaS hosted solutions, find some other way. Like, I don't know if WordPress in at least even 2 years time will come close to a Beaver Themer. I think that's very complex for them to approach that, but hey, they got more money than Beaver Builder. they have more people than Beaver Builder. Yeah. So it could happen.
And like, coming to the WordPress economy and how Gutenberg would affect WordPress economy of, plugins, themes, and other people who build products, we've already discussed, like, it will result in selling $1, Gutenberg block. How would you think it will affect people who sell something bigger in terms of functionality, like LMS plugins, even, membership plugins, or even page builders?
Yeah, I mean, it's still something that we're concerned over with Conductor, and that's why I say, like, we will keep our way of doing things. So I think the problem is when everybody rushes to do the same thing. So when everyone's making the same amount of blocks and it's all approached the same way, that's the problem. If you find, I think more than ever, if you find a way to do something different than another competitor, and finding it more specifically for the way that your customers want to work with it, that's what's going to be the win. And I think LMSs and membership sites, they have that, and e-commerce sites, that's the anchor. Is how do you put these things together? How do you put a course together? How do you put a product up for sale? Like, those steps are what's important, and that's where you'll find where your customers are. When it's just drag it in a block and put it onto a page, I mean, you can only fit so much into that block, and you can only vary so much. But there will be segments of customers that need to do things certain ways, and that's where you're going to win. I think for at least for the next 2 or 3 years. 5, 10 years, I don't know because of how fast things change. But I think LMSs and even page builders, to an extent, they can survive because it's the workflow. That is still up for grabs. Like, how to put a page out there is still up for grabs. If WordPress changed where you couldn't even install a page builder, that's where things.
Yeah, and there's already a fork of WordPress which is called Classic Press, which is WordPress minus Gutenberg. And I don't see it going far, but then that's another alternative, route from people who frustrated with Gutenberg talk and all that.
You know, there's a lot of people that were against that. I don't. Number one, it doesn't affect me. But number two, like, I thought that's what this was all about. Like, I thought that's what open source was all about. Like, if you want to fork it and do it your way, do it your way, right? In a democracy, if you're not happy with the local politician, run for office. Get out there and do it. I know there's a lot of stuff that happens on on top of that. There's a lot of overhead to that answer, but that is the essence of it. If you want to try something, I mean, look at Ghost, right? When Ghost launched, people were like, "Come on, it's a joke." I mean, Ghost is still around. I don't use it. I don't know what the latest news is, but
they
it's
have
running.
They have that membership thing now. Like, they charge per month. They have the hosted solution now, and they're going well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's up. It's everything is up for grabs. The worst thing is when you get complacent. Change is rough. I mean, that's something that Matt's been saying about Gutenberg, but he's going to continue to do it. And guess what? If they want to fork WordPress and come up with it, good, go do it. And what blows my mind again is developers who have embraced open source for years are, vocally against it and just, almost like pointing fingers at it. But like, why? Point fingers at WordPress and now you're just going to point fingers at somebody else. Nobody wins at this. Let them be. Let them fork it. If you want to help. If you don't, move on with your day.
Okay, let's move on to your toolbox. So what are your 5 current favorite tools that power your online business?
Coffee, number one.
Coffee equal tool, right?
Yeah. I'll bounce between like what we leverage.
And how many cups of coffee in a day?
Oh, probably about 5 cups of coffee in a day is where I hover around. Slack is immensely important. That's an obvious. Using that at the studio, using it at Pagely. A CMS that we use at Pagely is Active Campaign. Very powerful. Track all of our leads. At the studio, we use Agile CRM. That was very important to us. Freshdesk is a help desk support system which had been terrible for years. It was awesome when it first launched. Terrible for years. Like, I was just on the edge of getting rid of it at the studio. That's what we use to support Conductor in our themes. And they just launched a new UI refresh, and it's awesome. I love it now. Now it's like, now I love it again. So Freshdesk is huge. Other tools that I use would be, FreshBooks for invoicing, at the studio. And if I could think of one other tool, one that I use social media wise would be Buffer, the Buffer app.
Mm-hmm.
Another perfect example of a company that was like, in the beginning, because they were so transparent, everybody, all eyes on them. And it's, I don't want to say it's plateaued, but I feel like it's plateaued as a startup, but they're happy, I'd imagine. They're making money, they're profitable, they're building software. It's not HubSpot, it's not Marketo, it's not getting bought for $4.3 billion by Adobe, but it's a good piece of software that people use, the company's profitable, and they continue to develop features on it. You don't hear about it as much anymore, but it's okay, and that's a good example of a piece of software or a company that has built something that people enjoy using, they pay for it, and everybody's happy.
And I think a lot of alternatives for Buffer have cropped up in recent past, and they are like more fancy and glitzy. Maybe people are more into that, and they buy AppSumo deals and stick with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so which is your recommended web hosting service other than Pagely?
Oh, I see what's going on here. Listen, I think it depends on what type of site that you're running. I think the folks over at SiteGround do a great job. I use them. I've been using them for 3 years now. Yeah, I mean, in terms of shared hosting, you're probably not going to get a better value, that's out there. If you're more of a DIY type of person, DigitalOcean for sure. Those are two, great ones. And look, even if you're somebody who needs something that Pagely doesn't do, I think a company like Pantheon isn't a bad, alternative, if you need something that a little bit more affordable. But if you need the best managed WordPress hosting, you go to pagely.com, because number one, it's dedicated VPS, and the team is what it's all about. You don't know what you don't know when your site starts to break, and we solve it. Then you say, here's some more money. Here's more money.
Well, you ended very quickly. I thought you will go on.
No, I don't want to give it a straight appetite.
Okay, so which is your recommended page builder other than Conductor plugin, if you consider it one?
Yeah, no, I don't consider it a page builder. In fact, we are compatible with Beaver Builder. I really enjoy that product. I enjoy what the team has done. Again, pleasantly surprised, having not used it day to day in quite some time, but just running some tests the other day for Conductor, and it's just so much faster, snappier. I think they're a good company, and I think that's something that a lot of people miss is, and again, this is why I go back to a blue collar and sort of the relationship you have with a company. Knowing who you're buying from is super important, right? They might not have all the features you want, but if they're a good company, they're doing well, and they're moving forward with their product, why not support them?
Well, they are going to add all the glitz and glamour in the next update. All the typography, all the fancy shadow effect, rows. I've already tested the alpha version. They are gonna jump on the competition real bad this time around. So watch out.
I'll have to revisit it and make sure everything works.
Yeah, because it's in alpha version as of now. So I think it probably will be released somewhere in the end of November. So, so what is your recommended email marketing service?
Oh, that's a good one. It's funny you say that, because you just reminded me that I've been paying for a drip account for about a year,
and I don't use it.
And I don't use it. I've always wanted to go back to I've always wanted to switch out from there, because I'm actually not a fan of lead pages and their ownership. I've meant to get out of that. I mean, I do use it there. When you buy from Conductor, there's a drip sequence that goes out. So right now I've used that. It served us well. I get a little survey that goes out when somebody immediately buys Conductor. I ask them, why did you buy this? And I want to make sure that I know why they're buying it and who my customers are. But short of that, I'd like to try ConvertKit. Hear great things about that. Pagely, again, we use ActiveCampaign to do some fun things. So that's at a bigger perspective. I think that's a great product for bigger organizations. And then, of course, MailChimp. Although I did see an email today that they've redesigned stuff. I haven't seen exactly what they've done. I'll pull it up right now.
They've introduced tags feature as well now.
Yeah. So MailChimp is a great. I haven't been let down by what they do so far. And
it's free till you are in 2000 limit.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to your podcasting gear. Which mic, camera, services, software that powers your podcasting?
Yeah, so it varies. It varies a lot. So this is the primary podcasting mic that I use. I do a lot now with YouTube. So I'm using when I'm doing my show. Actually, when I'm doing my show, that's my for folks who are watching the video, you can see this my Sony A6500, and I have a Rode wireless mic there, and if I can do this with my finger, right there is a shotgun mic that I use if I'm doing something where I can't use my wireless mic. Way in the back there is a Blue Yeti, which I use on occasion.
But I have the mic. It's mostly for decoration, right? Even mine is for decoration now.
Yeah, it's a nice looking piece. And the mic that you're using, the ATR, is I'll use that if I'm on the road or doing a podcast, not in my home office.
Cool.
Software, I use Adobe Audition to record stuff. If we're doing an interview like this, I'll use Zoom, and I use Seriously Simple Podcasting and CastOS for my new show, We Are Here podcast, which is my local podcast. And then still for the Matt Report, I'm using the Blueberry Network because I had that from years ago.
Yeah, even I've started using Castos right from
Yeah.
the start, and it's amazing considering
Yeah.
that they have like inbuilt WordPress integration. And I
Yeah.
think they are introducing new features in terms of analytics very soon, because I just logged into analytics yesterday and say we are building something new. Hang in there. So
Yeah. Yeah. They have, I've talked to them quite a few times, and yeah, they have a lot of new stuff coming out.
so now you do a lot of things at a given time. So how do you stay focused as a creative person?
That's the hardest one. I have, so like I mentioned at the top of the show, it's been about 6 months since I've released a Matt Report episode, and it is something where I have changed to just create content that I want to create. And I think that when people hear, hey, the best way to grow your business, the best way to grow an audience is to do this thing called content marketing. So they, again, for those real analytical people, they sit down and they go, okay, content marketing, okay, create a content calendar. Here's the topics I can talk about. And I got 12 topics, and I can break that down to 6 posts and 3 episodes. And a lot of people build that, and that's fantastic. You can do that. But for me, I get burned out from creating content, the same content over and over again. For me, I've never considered myself an artist. I don't really consider myself an artist still, but it's like an artist dilemma where you start doing this thing over and over again. You're like, I need to challenge myself in a different way. And that's really what I've done with my personal YouTube channel, which contradicts what I was doing with my Plugin Tut channel, which grew tremendously when I was doing tutorials, because it was stuff that people were searching for.
Yeah.
How to do this, how to configure this. And that's a channel that makes me a couple $100 a month on YouTube ads. I haven't touched it in a year. And it's got almost like 7,000 subscribers, right? And had I kept pushing on it, I'd probably have more than, Andrew or Adam from WP Site Crafter or whatever his thing is. We don't need to link him up in the show notes. But it's just one of those things where I'm creating content that I want to just be happy with. I'm not pushing myself to force myself to get something out every single week anymore, because I'm not trying to measure that in that way.
And you said happy. So what is your happy spot in the online world and offline world?
Yeah. So, in the online world, again, it is just being able to create new connections, meeting new people. I'm happy that, like the story you told at the beginning of this episode, where, what I did to have you on the show sort of changed your, little slice of life. I had that same, there was another project that I'm working on, and can't mention names right now, but it was a small podcast project that might still launch. It was a very creative piece for me, totally not related to this stuff at all. The person that I was working on it with found their new soulmate because of the podcast that I was working on. She was working with me on it. She was the artist and sort of the creative behind it. And through the, just me reaching out to her randomly and saying, hey, do you want to work with me on this project? Because I think that you'd be a great fit for it. She said yes, and ultimately found her new partner in life because of it. That's awesome. That's what makes me happy to do these things. And on the offline world, I do a local podcast called We Are Here. Southcoast.fm. It's highlighting entrepreneurship in my local community. Small community, about an hour and a half south of Boston, Massachusetts. But there are people doing some awesome things here. And being able to highlight that and promote them is great. And that's what I enjoy doing. I do some mentorship stuff. And of course, my family, my kids, my wife, everything is what keeps me happy.
And one last question, what advice would you give to a person who's starting new in the online journey or is stuck of not having progress in their online, endeavors?
If you're stuck, if you don't know how to move forward, or if you're just getting started and you don't know, what to do, you have to take a moment and reach out to people and ask them for help. I know it sounds like so cliche to say that, but there are a lot of people who won't do that, who won't take the step or don't know who to reach out to. and ask for help. Just what you really want to do is, a lot of people get overwhelmed with asking because they're thinking they have to ask all of these questions. Just go up to somebody and say, hey, can I just pitch you my idea? Like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. I'm a web designer. I want to focus on people who, make cakes. I want to build cake websites. What do you think? Do you think this makes sense? Whatever it is, if you can pitch your idea to somebody and get comfortable doing that and be open to feedback, that'll get you out of that. Like, I'm stuck trying to get this out, and do it with more people. You get more comfortable with it. If you're beyond that, you're like 3 months into running with this, you feel a little bit more comfortable with what you're doing. You got to start. We'll go back. Well, you have to start creating content and just start talking about what you're doing and just put it out there. Naturally, you become more confident with what you're doing because you're talking about it on a podcast. You're doing Instagram stories. That's the thing. A lot of people think content marketing has to be this heavy, daunting thing. It doesn't. It can be Instagram stories. It can be Instagram posts. It can be just tweets. Just doing something that shows where you're growing, how you're growing, and where you're going is very important. And those first 6 months can be tough, but a little bit easier if you can reach out to somebody, pitch your idea, understand it, and journal that journey all along is pretty fun.
Okay, hearing your reply, one word was still haunting my head. It was like, any last words on Gutenberg?
Listen, I think that there's this is, from within the chaos comes the change that we're all looking for. And I think it's a good thing. I think Matt Mullenweg is right when he says that, we can't get complacent. We can't be doing the same thing over and over again. And I think, one of the things I used to admire about Matt was his idea that WordPress could be an operating system of the web. I think we might be seeing that idea surface with Gutenberg. I think you might see Gutenberg like you see it with Drupal. It's coming out for Drupal now or whatever. It's in its infancy there. You might see Gutenberg in your car one day. When you're typing on the Tesla, it might be a Gutenberg editor, right?
Google won't be happy, neither Apple.
Yeah, right. I think that, that might be what we're looking at. So it's exciting, but it's going to be a challenge. But I mean, what isn't a challenge? Everybody thinks, people don't want to change. They don't want to challenge. They want their little, sandbox to get disturbed, but it has to happen. And, just fight the good fight. Be reasonable with people, right? See both sides of it and try to draw a conclusion from there. I'm not anti-Gutenberg. I'm just looking for more transparency and, hey, you're trying to make a business out of it, just say it. Just say it.
Yeah,
it's quite
fair enough. Okay, Matt, thank you so much for your time. And it was amazing talking to you.
Devinder, it was a pleasure. I'm glad to be part of your podcasting journey.
Have a good day.
You too.